everybody. This is Dr. Regina Bradley. This is not Outcasted Conversations, but this is definitely equally important. So 1994 was a woodshed year. There were so many great and classic albums came out, and me representing for the South, I had to include, the Bard himself, Scarface's The Diary, which turns 20 this year. I really don't know how I feel about that yet. So with us, we got some of the heavy hitters, the up-and-comers in Southern hip-hop scholarship, just Southern dopeness in general, Mr. Langston, Colin Wilkins, and Mr. Maco, Faniel, future PhDs in the game. What's going on, good sirs? How y'all doing today?
Good. What's going on?
Thank you for having us.
So I actually just want to sit here and take notes because both of y'all are from Texas and Houston and things. So why don't we start there? So you know what I'm saying? What was the reception for The Diary like when it dropped back in '94? Like, what do you think some of the conversations starting were happening?
Well, Regina, I was thinking about this. I was in 9th grade when The Diary came out in 1994. I had just moved from one part of the north side called Greenspoint to Acres Homes. And so this was my entry into, trying to emulate as much as possible black masculinity. And so, The Diary for, the guys that I grew up around, and also just the reception of Scarface, it was, something that we expected to be great. And it was just another opportunity for some of our stories or the stories at the periphery of our lives to be told. And never really considered, when I looked at that this went platinum, I never really considered that it went platinum. It was just Scarface. It was just The Diary. It was just, our some of the stories being told and, being told by great lyricists at that particular time.
Yeah, well, I was a little younger. I was 10 years old in '94. So I wasn't really as immersed in hip-hop, as I soon came to be. But, I did my digging, and just looking at Scarface's, the point in Scarface's career, this was '94. The Ghetto Boys, Till Death Do We Part, had just dropped in '93. Great album. I love that album. But, I think the dominant discourse about that album was centered on Big Mike. Big Mike came with it and kind of, according to many, outshined Scarface on a Ghetto Boys record. It never happened before, And other cats on the West Coast, Ice Cube, Tupac were getting props for the gangsta rap thing. The SUC screwed up clique was bubbling in Houston. So I think Scarface has something to prove, with The Diary, And I think that's clear. He showed his ass. He came with it, So I think that's, I guess, what I take from, its release. It was, Scarface asserting himself, asserting his dominance, asserting his supremacy in terms of emceeing in hip-hop and nationally.
Well, because like I kind of said, '94 was just a big year. I'm surprised nobody has like a whole book on the music that dropped in 1994. But the reason I find The Diary so interesting is that you're putting Scarface in conversation with this kind of ongoing conversation about gangster rap. You know what I'm saying? And on top of that, you have, I think Ice Cube was on the Dead Hand joint, right? It's kind of like that collaboration or whatever. But like someone directed to you a little bit in terms of the musicological perspective. What is the significance of thinking about how Scarface kind of changes, or does he change what we understand gangster rap to be, being from Houston?
Yeah, I think one, I think he grounds it in a particular place. I think he grounds it in a particular, as Maco talked about, experience, and that's clear. He kind of defines or characterized Houston as a particular urban space. The way he created Houston on The Diary sounds much different than the ways Ice Cube created Los Angeles or Compton or South Central, and the ways other artists from other locales created their spaces. So I think he did that. I think that was the key part here, creating Houston, defining Houston as a dark space, a dark climate, and clearly a hyper-violent scary world. So.
And I think what's interesting about that, what you get 4 years later on the Resurrection, there's a song they have, "The World is a Ghetto," and on Willie D's verse, he says, "Your ghetto ain't no harder than mine." And when Scarface leads off the song, he says, "Look on your map and see what Texas at." And then he says, "Look where Houston at. It's on the borderline of hard times." And so what he does for Houston is that it's a further legitimization, particularly within hip hop, of us being authentically ghetto, authentically hood, so that we can fit within this narrative of what it means to be hip hop. So people knew that Los Angeles or South Central was hard. We saw that through the movies. We heard that. We knew about other places. But he's saying, look, we got these things going on here. And so, not only does the South have something to say, but the Southwest and the Sun Belt had something to say about what it means to be black in the ghetto in a major city.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point too, and that was something I was thinking about as I was re-listening to the album. Is that you have Southern Playalistic drop maybe about 6 months before the Diary. I think the Diary drops in like November or December '94, and Outkast Southern Playalistic drops in like April or something like that. But you having this conversation about what Southern urbanity looks like and sounds like in ways that kind of open up this conversation about what a gangster rap or what this aesthetic looks like outside of these kind of commonly referred to industrial spaces. I thought that was particularly important. And I'm not saying that they compare Houston to Atlanta, but I really do feel like there's a type of conversation taking place there in terms of how we're using this kind of well-known aesthetic to ground ourselves in the hip-hop conversation, as you both are kind of pointing out. Do you have any thoughts on maybe what the comparison and contrast might be in terms of how it kind of complicates the urban narrative that's being put into place?
I'll let you take that one, Maco, first.
Okay. So I think that so there's another album that came out that year also from Houston. It was Super Tight by UGK. So we have this is the sophomore album. Then we have Scarface's album. We have Southern Playalistic. We have Illmatic. And we have Method Man. So all this is coming out at one time. So whereas we have on Super Tight, it's braggadocious. It's very sexist. It's very there are lines from that album that as a 33-year-old adult, I'm like thinking, why the hell did I know that as a ninth grader in school, and why were we saying these things trying to mac to young women? But what Brad does is he tells this what's called a Southern Gothic. As literary folk, y'all can understand it, that anything that's popping off is dark. There's no happy ending. It deals with death, and it also tells about ghettos where our movements are through cars, and then the beefs that we have are not about colors. It's about cliques and neighborhoods, because within these certain neighborhoods and within these certain cliques, and then within these certain schools, there's these beefs. People vying for who's going to be, the hood star, who's going to be, of all of the hoods, who's going to be the best hood, because, that's important for those particular spaces.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think, two very different albums, two very different, I don't want to say intentions, but I think maybe outcomes. I think Southern Playalistic, what you have is Outkast creating or defining, expressing a particular social world, the social world of the hood that includes the cars, the pimps, the players, the hustlers, but also just the general familial, friendly social interactions between people. Scarface, on the Diary, I think he was a little more particular, a little more specific, a little more focused on the experiences of the streets, of the gangsters. He created a space. This is a particular space within urban life that he's talking about. Not the totality of it, but just particular, elements. So I think those are kind of the differences between those two. But I think both of them are revelatory in different ways.
Yeah. What's interesting about this, by the time that the diary comes out, Scarface is actually 8 years in the game as a professional, and 8 years in the game as a professional, but he is still telling some observational stories of the place where he grew up and still lived. And what's still interesting about him, almost 30 years later, is that he is still street. He hasn't gone Hollywood, but he's also recognized and loved by people who have gone Hollywood as this authentic person that is the same Brad Jordan in 1994 that he is in 2014. And so that story that he's telling I find that interesting, because he could have moved away from that after being 8 years in the game.
Mm.
Yeah. And he showed people how hustlers age. Hustlers, hoods can age with grace, and I think that's the most one of the most interesting parts of his career. I think he's done that better than most other gangster rappers from that era.
I wanted to actually kind of go to the album itself, so kind of walk through some of the tracks. So kind of just start at the top. Why do you think that he calls it the diary? It makes me, when you think of a diary, you think about like interior thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Part of me feels like it was a diary, not necessarily for his own thoughts, but for the pulse of what was going on in Houston, these inner city conversations that are happening that might not manifest in a larger, not even just hip hop, but just a larger conversation in general. So, what are your thoughts on why you think it's called the diary?
Well, a diary is a repository, for your most personal, your total self, and you just said it, your thoughts. And that's the thing he's doing with the diary. Whereas, I feel like Ice Cube, Ice-T, these other gangster rappers, they presented you an experience. Scarface took you deep inside the psychology of the streets, So that's what you're getting with the diary, What are the attitudes, emotions, feelings, if there are any, of someone knee deep in the midst of street life? And he gave it to you raw, unfiltered, as you would in a diary. So.
And what I think about that, I was reading some commentary on it. He talks about they didn't go into the studio with a plan. What happens, what comes out, ends up being beautifully connected to what we think a diary is. But I think it's not only his diary, but it's the diary of and the sensibilities of people who are living life on the margins in a city, particularly in a city that is known for money. Houston is a city that's known for being the mecca of oil and gas, being the mecca of healthcare, being the mecca of aerospace. Houston is a city that you go to make money. But in the backdrops of all of this happening, he's telling about, these are the sensibilities of people who are forgotten about or not talked about when we talk about, this great city.